Hello everyone. Hi Dipankar. Hi Manu. Hi Ashutosh. Good evening Simran. Good evening Ashutosh. Good evening everyone. How you guys are doing? How you guys are doing? Good evening Anu. Good evening Dipankar. Good evening everyone. Good evening Navita. I hope you guys are doing good. Let's wait for another 2 minutes and we start our session. Good evening Muskan. Good evening Siddhant. Is my voice clear? Am I loud and clear? And is my screen visible? Just let me know. I guess this. Give me a moment, guys. I'll be a minute. Okay. Good evening, guys. Okay. Sir, I am unable to download yesterday's GitHub code. Why so? What happened? Just give me a minute. You are unable to download yesterday's GitHub code. Why so? Like, it's simple. You need to run the GitHub clone, get clone, and then repository name. Let me check. Is it working or not? I hope so. It should be working. HTTPS. Item. What happened? Like, it is showing day before yesterday's code. How come? Yesterday only day 4 bootcamp source file. We have these three things. And I guess in component also we have use effect. Yeah, see, we have our fetch movies and use effect here. Okay, we'll look into that. a bit after. So in yesterday sessions, we have learned about the side effects such as fetch function, which you use to get data from an API. Also, we also learned about how to use effect to use these side effects. Am I clear? Do you guys understood this? Do you guys have any problem in this? We also got an example of set timeout, how to use set timeout. We also learned how to use fetch. Am I right? We also learned how to map our data to a component. Correct? Correct? Give us a thumbs up, bro. Am I audible? Is my screen visible and am I audible? Is my screen visible? Am I audible? And I hope so. You guys have did what we did yesterday. You guys have did it also. You guys have practiced it also. Okay. So today we'll be learning about context API. But before context API, I would like to show you an example. I'd like to give you an example to make you understand why do we need context API, what problems it solves, what problem we actually face due to which context API or other packages such as Redux, Flux has been introduced into React. Okay. So before moving forward, let's close all this down, guys. So let me go to React Basic, but let's first run our application. Something is wrong there. What happened? Okay. Okay. We go and start our application. That is npm start. This is our application. We enter our name, and here we will search for any movie. Then we are getting a movie, right? This was our application, what we built yesterday. So before moving forward, teaching you or explaining context API, let's understand what problem React creates, to which context API came into place to overcome it. Okay, so we'll just move into our app.js. Okay, and here I'll just comment. Okay, I'll just comment the movies. Right now, don't need movies. So this will be one. And I will create two components. One will be parent and one will be child. Okay. So this app component will be the grandparent, like the outer component, the main component, in which we will be having one component called parent, and another inside that parent we will be having another component called child. Okay. Just for a demonstration, I will create these two components, and let's create one dot parent dot js, and we'll also create one child dot js. Okay. And I will call parent here. For parent, I will create component similarly. They will be parent. And for child also, I will be creating like this. Okay. So inside parent, I will call my child component. Again, I'll call my child component. Okay. And inside my app, I'll call here the parent component. Is this clear? Like this is the pretty easy one how to create a components. Right. So we have our parent, and inside our parent, we have our child. Right. Now, suppose we need to pass this username to child component. The child component requires this username for any functionality. Okay. This child component this child component requires this information, like this state called username, then how will we pass this thing from parent, from app component to child component? How will we pass this? How will we giving this information to child component from app component? By importing. Okay, so it's a good props. But remember that child component is not directly accessible to this app component like this parent. It is inside parent component, right? So to reach child component, we have to pass through parent component, right? Parent component comes in middle. So let's, for example, let's say a child component requires those information. Okay, what are those information? I'll again say it will be username. Okay, for the right till this point, I'll say only username is demonstrated with this only from props, right? I will be changing username from props. So I require this thing. So from like, so here also I need to pass those things. But to pass those things, I need to require those things, right? And to require this parent, require those things from parent, we need to get this information from app component to parent component. So here also we will be requiring the same thing, props. And here also I will be destructuring the username from props. And now I will pass this username to username. And here I can use this username. I will say child username. Correct? Anything happened? Anything didn't went good? Username. Okay. Here in the parent, we didn't pass username. In parent also, we need this. We have username equals to username. So you can see from the app component Alex is been passed to this child component. Okay, the information, the data of this username is being passed to child component, but in middle we have used parent also. Rather the fact parent doesn't require it. Parent doesn't even require username. Still we have to pass this thing from parent to child, right? So this approach or this thing what we did right now is called prop drilling. We drilled the prop from very higher component, higher level component to very lower level component. Okay, so from the very parent to the very child, we have drilled the component username to access it. Now suppose, now think of a application in which there are lot deep down components and you require some information from a very high level parent. Then it will be literally a mess because the components which even doesn't require that information will be receiving it. It will acquire some space, it will acquire some memory and resources will be wasted on them, right? So to overcome this, Redux came into play and Redux said, okay, we will provide you a global state management system. What do you mean a global state management system? The information which you think will be required across the application in a very nested manner, that information will be stored in a global store. Okay, we will say, okay, a global store will be maintained. A global store will be maintained. For example, let's think a global store will be there. And whoever, whichever component requires information can directly access the information from that store. Okay. Whichever component requires the information can directly access the information from that store and use it. So that we don't have to depend on their parent components to get the data. Similarly, an example, we can say we can make a global store here in the application from which the child component can access the information which it wants, rather disturbing the parent component. Here the parent component doesn't even need this information, but still we have to pass it, right? So we'll make a global store like the Redux given solution that we can maintain a global store in which the information can be stored, which is required throughout the application, and whichever component requires it, it can subscribe to it and get the information, right? Now, Redux when gave it solution, so it was very lengthy and it was very tricky to learn and all. Okay, and it is still, but it is still, but now recently Redux has introduced Redux Toolkit, which made it a little bit easier. But legacy Redux was very complex and very tricky to learn. Now, the solution which Redux provided, it was used for very heavy applications, very large applications. Okay. Now, if we want to achieve something that same Redux global state management system, we have to write a lots of boilerplate code in Redux. Now, to this, React said, okay, we will give our own global state management system that we say context API. It works as the same, and it is inbuilt in React only. We don't have to install another package for it. Okay. So to achieve that global state management system, React context API is introduced. So now to make React context API, we will make a different file here in the source folder, and we will say data context .js. Okay. Now to make a context, what context provides? Context provides you a provider. It will have a provider which will provide you the information, and the components which will be using that information will be using something called consumer, or we say the use context hook. So there are two components here. One is provided, the provider which will provide your data, and the consumer which will consume the data. And of course, we also have a store in where all the data will be get stored. Okay. So this is the kind of logic: store, provider which will provide data, consumer which will consume the data, which component requires it. Now to make this context, we'll make, let's say, a provider that will be data provider. First make the context. We need to create the store, right? So we'll create the context that is will be called data context. And to this, I will name data provider, because this will act as a data provider. Where is my rename? We'll make it data provider. Okay. Data provider.js, and here in data provider, we'll make our first data context. To create a context, we have our function called create context from React. Okay. Now, once this is created, we'll create our data provider, that is provider. It will be arrow function, and within this arrow function, we will be having data context dot provider. See, and it will be a JSX element kind of thing. See, after all, it is a function only, right? Data provider, and we will be exporting these two. Here we will be using named export one. We will be exporting data context to achieve that data, and we will be also exporting a data provider. Right. Now, before moving forward, I need you guys to understand there is one more concept called children in props. Okay. There is one more concept called children in props. Correct? You guys are getting my point? What is children? Let's say this child component is being used here, right? For example, if I want to embed some HTML, I want to give some HTML as prop to another component. Not HTML, not exactly HTML. I want to provide JSX to another component as a prop. Then how will I? So for that, as same as HTML, how we do, how we wrap some HTML components in another HTML tags. Similarly, here also, here in this child component, I will say, okay, I want H1 saying H1 saying hello. Okay. Now, if you provide this information like this, na, so in React for ease of developers, we can access it. We can access it in the name of children. Okay. We can access it in the name of children. Correct. And now, if I go and if I directly call this thing, if I directly call this thing, I can see hello out here. So let's make this also H1. A simple concept. Whatever JSS element you pass within a component in this format, like a HTML tag, it can be accessed as a form of children, in the name of children. Again, it is not a reserved keyword by React, but it is for use of developers only to understand that, okay, this component has some children. This child component has some children. So to access those children, we can use this name as children. Okay. So where I have directly accessed this children and I have this my H1. So now it is saying hello child and the name and the information what we passed. Right. So we have this children, what we passed here, hello. And again, whatever information we have passed from the props is also present. Now in data provider also, we require children. We need children. So I'm directly destructuring it here only. It can be written like this, or it can be same as before. If you want it to be props and want to say props. So it is the same thing. For ease of convenience, I am not writing like this. I will say children right here. And here I will provide children. You will get to understand why I did this. Now we have our context ready. Okay. Now we have to define what data we need to provide. What data needs to be maintained by this store or maintained by this context. So here we saw that this username, this entire set username and set username is the thing which we are handling, right? This username is being required by our child component. So what we'll copy this. Okay, for now let's create another one and we will remove this username in later part of the video. So we'll make a state called, let's say it is new user name. Similarly, it will have a set function also, the new username, and obviously it will be a use state. Initially, let's provide some name. Let's say Shruti out here. Okay. Let's say initially this username having a value of Shruti. And here in the provider, we need to pass it as a value. We need to pass new username so that this new username is available to all the components which will be wrapped around this data provider. Okay. See, we have exported this data provider, right? So whatever component will be wrapped inside this data provider will have access to this state called the state username. Now, how to wrap it? We will wrap it to the highest level. And where is our highest level? Our highest level is here in the app.render. We are exporting app here, right? So we will wrap this app inside that data provider. So we have our data provider and we'll say wrap our app component inside this data provider. So now the entire app component have that access to this use state. Our entire app component have the access to this new use state which is being maintained in context API. Correct? So our use of this data provider is over. Now we have provided our information to the entire application, but now how to consume it, how to use it? That's the point. We have provided it. It is having that information, but how will we use it? So let's say we'll go to children component only. We are requiring the information right here, right? So here we'll say const, and here we'll be using a hook called use context. Use context is used to consume the information that is in the context store. Okay. And here we will provide the name of the context. And what we have given the name of context is data context. And we have exported it also. So we will be importing it here, saying data context. I want data context here. So it is saying use context of what? Data context. And data context have that value here. And you see data context dot provider, and we have given the value new username. So now we can access that new. I guess the name is correct. And the same name. We have new username here. And now if I paste it here, and if we go inside Alex, you can see Shruti is here. And Shruti, we have defined it here. So now this child component is directly getting the data from the context and using it. Now this child component, which is being inside this parent component is inside our app component, is directly accessing the data which is provided in this data provider or data context. Am I clear? Was that clear, guys? Now our child component is directly accessing the data which is there present in the context. It has now it doesn't have any use of it doesn't have to disturb this parent component or this app component to get the data. It is now directly accessing the data from the context. Right? So here also this set username is being used in header. It is being used in login also, this function. So what we will do, we will replace this. We will replace this username and set username with our new username. Okay. And to do that, we'll go here. Right now we have only shared this username state, only the value, but we didn't share the function. Can't able to read your code properly. Okay. We'll zoom. Is it clear now? Is it clear now? Are you guys able to view the code? Is it visible now? Come on, guys. Have you hi Utpal? Okay. Missed any topic? Okay, we are in the middle of learning context API and global state management. So be in the session. I will again repeat the concept once. For the time being, are we guys okay? I'll just again go and make you understand what happened right now. Initially, initially in the app component, we have a parent component, and inside that parent component, we are having a child component. And now this child component is using, again go back to username. Okay. So now what initially what we are doing, like we are passing this username to this parent component first, then this parent component is passing the value of username to child component. So and then the child component is able to use that value username, right? So this entire process is quite lengthy and is quite messy, and it is called prop drilling. We are drilling our prop through the components. We are drilling the prop through the components to the component whichever it requires the information. Now think of an example if there are a lot of components in a nested manner and you require information from very top level to the very low level, then it is a mess. Then it is a mess. To overcome this thing, React came up with a solution called Context API. And what Context API says? Context API says that we will provide you a global store kind of thing. We'll provide a global store kind of thing. And whichever component requires the information can directly access from the store. It doesn't have to disturb other components. It doesn't have to disturb its parent component or its grandparent component for the information. Right? So Context API provides us that solution. Provides us the solution of global store. And to create that global store or global context, this is the way. First, you need to create the context using create context function from the React itself only. And you have to create a provider. Provider because context have three major concepts. One is the store, which will be having the data. Next, we will be having a provider, which will provide the data. And next, we have a consumer, which will consume the data. The store is storing and maintaining the data. Provider is providing the data throughout the application. Okay. And finally, we have a consumer who will consume the data or who will use the data. Okay. So for creating this context, we have this create context function. So context is created. Now this context provides the value. Now these are the value which are being maintained in the store. For example, we have created a view state having a new username, and initially it is having a state called Shruti. So this state is being provided through this data provider to whole application. And how it is being provided to whole application? It wraps the app component itself inside it. So whatever component is wrapped inside the data provider will have the access to that global store. Will have the access to the values which we provided here, the information which we provided here. So right now we have only provided new username, so you can access only new username. If we go and if I go and remove it from here, so now we will see it will have Alex. Let's change it to new username. Also, it will throw an error. Not error. So right now we have not provided anything from the context, so it will have nothing. Okay. So here, if we provide new username, whatever will you provide there will be available to the components. Okay. Now a similar kind of thing we are doing here also. We are passing the username and set username from app to header first and then to login also. Right. Instead of that, what we can do, we can directly access it from context. So let's make that. Now we have this new username. We'll also pass this set username also. Okay. So that anyone who wants to update this name can update it. Now we will set this to Shruti. Now we will go to our header.js. Here also, we'll access it. Now how we'll access it? We'll access it using use context. Now use context will take a parameter. It will ask for which context you want to use. Here we create a data provider. For example, in future we will having multiple sections. Okay. For example, some login. For example, some data from any API specific API or all. So you can create multiple context also. So here we have created only one context called data context or data provider. You can create multiple one. So in data provider, we have data context. And so here we will use data context. If you say, okay, use context, which context? Data context. And data context, we have provided these two things. So I will copy these two and I will use these two. Correct. And now instead of username, I will use new username. Okay. And instead of handle logout, I will use set new username. Okay, I'll just refresh it once. Enter as Alex. So Alex is there. And let's move this state. I don't require this. Anything is not being used. Set new username. Set new username. Children, they have a header, button click, set new username. We have a data context. New username. We will be having that. Okay. We need to provide it in login also. My bad. Login.js also. Login.js also. We are using handle login, but now we don't require handle login. What we will say? Okay. Const. I will say, I'll go and say use context. I'll go and say data context. And again, from the data provider, I will be requiring this. Set new username. Control press C. And then click. Perhaps this should work. And let's anything is going off. And the login, set input, set new username. Set your Alex. Okay, we have Alex here. Oh, mhm. We have a set username as input. We don't have a dot value. It will happen here. We remove this. We require this. And header also. Username. Wait a second. Username, right? We have this. Okay. We have this username. And we require it. Const use context, and I will be saying use my data context. Username correct. As the name is there, it will be data remove list. If I say Abhinav, okay, great. So Abhinav is there. And the header also, we have to pass name, I guess. So here it will be new username only. Correct. So now whatever we are doing here with this username, now it is not required. Now it is not required, and these passing the props is also not required because we are directly accessing and wherever the username is used, this parent.username. Okay. So now this parent.username is also not required. And if I refresh, and if I go, and if I say go for Shakti, so you can see Shakti is being here, Shakti is also being accessed by the child component. Correct? So now this and use of this state, which is being prop drilled to the child component, is now of no use. We can remove this. Okay. And also let's get back to our movies component. I'll just comment it up. So I'll say PPC. And if I go for Avengers, Araba is working perfectly. Fine. So this was the use of context API. Understood? This is how we use context API. Am I clear? Am I clear? Did you guys get how context API work, how global state is managed? Okay. Alex, we'll just revise and go through it again. Okay. We'll just close. We'll revise and go through it again. What we were initially doing, that we are passing the information what was there here. We have made a state, and we are passing the information through all the components to the required component, right? All the components. Slowly, please. Slowly, please. What we were doing initially, we are doing like we are creating a state. Okay, and for example, that information which was present in the parent component in the higher level component is required by a component which was way inside, way nested. Okay, so to do that, what we initially do is like to pass it to the each and every level of component, irrespective of the fact that the each level of component required information or not. As in the example we saw that child component required information, right? But in middle, parent also got that information, irrespective of the fact that parent doesn't have any use of that information. It just got that information because it has to pass it to child. Correct? Now think of a situation where there was a lot of nesting. Okay, there are a lot of nested components, lot of child components in level language, and they require some information from the very top level, from the very parent. Now what we have to do? Then you have to pass it to every component till the information reaches the required component or the needy component. Now this is a very tedious task. This is very messy, and it also consumes lots of memory and lots of resources. Now to overcome this, initially Redux came into picture and it said, okay, what we will do, we will create a global store for you guys. So whichever component requires the information, it can access the information from that store directly, and it will not disturb the other parent components. So the component whichever requires the information, whosoever requires the information, in our case, it was a child component which is requiring the information, right? In our case, here the child component was there, who was requiring getting the information from the app component. From the app component, here we have username, right? We are getting the information from the app component to child component. Here the child component. And middle, parent was here who was getting that information for unnecessary timing. Okay, it was of no use for the parent. Just because child need it, so parent have to get it data. Okay, so Redux came into picture and Redux said, okay, we will give you a global store kind of thing, and the component which requires information can directly access it from there. Now, when Redux brought this thing into picture, brought this thing into development, it was very tricky. It was very lengthy to set up to set up that global store. It has a lot of boilerplate code. Okay, so you guys must have heard that Redux is a bit tricky to understand. But later now, Redux had introduced Redux Toolkit also, which is a little lighter and easier version of Redux Toolkit, Redux Legacy, and it was named Redux Toolkit. Okay. Now both Redux and Redux Toolkit are used for big applications. Are used for big applications which have much more scalability in it, where you know that data will be coming in millions and trillions. Okay. So there the store state management needs to be scalable. So Redux and Redux Toolkit are used there. But for small level applications, for such as like these applications, a lighter version required. So React said, okay, we will also come up with the same thing called Global State Management System, and we will name it as Context API. So context here is that store which maintains the information, which maintains the states, and API because it provides that information. As the API we saw here, where was it? Mhm. The API which we saw here, it is providing us some information, right? So context is also providing us information, so it is called Context API. And it has three levels. One is store, one is provider, and one is consumer. Store is the thing where we maintain the data. For example, here you are maintaining the data. Provider, it is providing the data, and consumer are the components, or consumer is, you can call this context. So it is consuming the data. So consuming the data is done by use context, using use context function, and providing the data we provide it like that. And whatever things you need to provide, you will be give it as a value to the provider, and this data provider, if you see this data provider component, will wrap all those components which are requiring the information. So this data provider is used in the very top level, here in the index file. So and it wrapped the app component within it, which means whatever things are there inside app component will have the access to the information which data provider provided you. Okay, so whatever information the data provider provides you will be accessible within this app component. All the components which are within this app component will be able to consume those data. And we can see also that app component can also consume the data. We can see that header component is also consuming the data. We are seeing that login component is also consuming the data, and our child component which is also consuming the data. But parent component doesn't require it, so it doesn't consume it. You can see we have not, since parent component doesn't require it, so parent component doesn't have that information. It is all chilling. Okay, I don't have to interfere. I am happy. Whichever component required the data, it directly accesses from context. Saying, okay, use context. Which context? Data context. You can make different contexts for different purposes. Okay. And similarly, you have to wrap all those within that child, within this thing, to the top level. You have to wrap all those in the top level. Okay. So this was the use of context. Now what we can do if you want, like this was the thing, this was the information which you are passing again and again. Also, in production level application, you can be asked to store the API data in the context. Okay. For example, if the API data is coming only once and it is required in multiple places, so we can do what? You can store that API information in context only. Right now, what we are doing, like we are setting the data, right? We are setting this movies dot search here because we have this search movies right here, right? Instead of doing this, what we can do, we can directly make a state here. We can directly make a state here for saying const, let's say new movies. We'll go and say new movies, and we'll make a state the same as it like that only. We'll provide this to our provider. Okay. And similarly, in movies also, we can access those. We can access. How we can access it? I will say const. I will use this context. So call back. Use context. And I will say use data context. Data context. And from data context, what I want? I want these two things: new movies and movies. Okay. So we'll go here. We'll access those. We'll descriptor those. And now instead of, let's say we are going and setting this set movies, right? What we'll say? We'll make this thing. We'll cut it here. We'll go and set it here. And same time, we will also set new movies to this only. Data dot search. Similarly, here also we'll do the same thing. Just to demonstrate you that we can do this also. Don't want this. We will say set new movies. This. Okay. Why we use children inside data provider? Okay. Whenever I just explained it earlier also. Right. Where was I? Header, no, not in header. An app only. Okay. Let's move this. Show me some. So I will go and say Alex. So can you see? Okay. I have used this parent component, and inside this parent component, I've used this child component, but within this child component, I have passed some JSX. Can you see? Just as we wrap something inside HTML tags, like inside div tags, we do give h1, right? So h1 will be a child of div. Similarly, in this child component, I have passed h1 like this JSX element, right? Now to access this JSX and to present it in our child component or the component which is being passed with the JSX element, we use children. Like you can use this term children's children, and it is not necessary that you use children only, but for developers ease of purpose, we name it as children so that we know, okay, whatever comes inside this component in the form of JSX like this can be accessible by children, can be accessible by children. Okay. So that's why we use children. Any limitation or restriction for using data providers? That is context API. Limitations as of now, there are like, see, when we have to scale a lot, okay. As I said, like this is one data provider. We are maintaining only this set username. For example, you might be having a different use case. You might be storing some different information. For example, if there is an application and it is having an authentication information also, and it is also having some API information also, and both need to be stored in a global state. So you can't actually store the auth information and the API information there itself only, right? So there you need to create multiple providers or multiple context, and to for that you have to wrap it also. As we wrapped it here like this, you have to wrap it. For example, if you are maintaining a lot of use cases, then will be having a tree like structure here, one after the other, and it will again go messy. It is not that optimal. Okay, so therefore we say for having small applications, you can use context API, but for bigger applications or a scalable application, you go for Redux or Flux. Okay, go for Redux or Flux. It will have a global store, and in store you can set in Redux there is a store. Okay, and within that store it is divided into slices, sub slices. So every store have some slices, and each slice represents your data, whatever use case data you are using. Okay. So you only need to wrap the entire application once, and you can access specific slice or specific part of the store which have your information. Okay. So this is one limitation we can say like for context API. And children, I also explained. Whenever you want to access the JSX fast by a component, faster component, you can access in the form of children. So right here, so here also, here is my index. Here also, I want to I want the all the components, all the JSS which is inside this app have to get the data from data provider. That's why I've used children out here. So whatever will be passed here, it can be accessed here and it will have the information. Got my point? And it will have the information. So let's move to this whatever what were we doing? New movies and movies. Let's go to movies and set movies. For search movie, we will have new search movie. And I guess we will be same. And here also you can say okay for new movies, we'll go for this. And again, I guess it will work same only if we go here and do this. I don't think so. If we go and say ABC here and just see it is working fine. You see, okay. For A, it will make sense. Go for Kalki. Kalki is there. Okay. So with this, we have completed our app movies application with the concepts use state, use effect, and finally context API also, storing our data in a global store, right? And I hope now you guys will be understanding React code, how to create React application, okay? How to create state, how to conditionally render things, how to use side effects such as fetch or set timeout, how and when all what all the times when the React or React application re-render itself on changing of any state. Okay, I hope you guys have understood this. Now, you guys will be able to create your own React application. Am I right? You guys will now be able to create your own React application. Okay, deploying it on Netlify. Okay, let's try Netlify. I've used Netlify a lot before. Netlify. Okay, let's deploy this application also. Okay, go for a login. To which should I log in? Okay, Netlify. Let's see. Why it is not? I do have connect here. Authentication error failed due to already have a registered user with this email address. Log in to connect the GitHub account. Okay, I don't know. Wait, let's see. Let me know. Look, good, good. I guess I have something here already. Uh, Let's see if we can deploy it. Not now. Hmm, new concept. Add new site. Deploy manually. Okay, okay. I guess we'll do it by building our application. So we'll just create. In the initial sessions, I have already told that when you deploy your application to a production level thing, I'm having a problem with Netlify. So is there any naming convention required? I don't know. Like I seriously don't know right now. I used Netlify way before. Have to see. Let's try. Let's try what happens. If not, then we search and do it. CD React Basic, I guess. Yep. First, let status. Let's see. Let's deploy it to our GitHub that you guys can access it. With that dot, git commit -m. We at Bootcamp day 5. I guess it is done, and I will go for git push. I hope so. It should be there. Yeah, it is there. And Bootcamp just now. Oh, great. So we'll go and run our command. For building, we have a command called build. So we'll go and say npm run build. I am doing it the way the way I was used to do in college time. Let's see if it works or not. So we have our build folder. We go to Netlify. Then we go to documents, personal projects, React Bootcamp, React Basic. Okay, back. Okay, let's see if it works or not. I hope so. It should work. Publish the deploy for okay, cool. I guess it is deployed. Alex, Avengers. Yeah, done. And I guess you can change the name also. I guess they have an option change the name. Site details, change site name. Okay, React Boot Camp Movies Joy. Will that work? I hope so. Work. Good. Yeah, it is working. So you guys can access this deployed app also. I'll just paste this. So this is the link for the deployed application, and I will also give you the link for this GitHub profile also. So this is the deployed link, and this is our local host. So our application is also deployed. So when Alex, you can see Alex, and if we go log out, yeah, it's working fine. Alex, and you can search for Avengers. Yep, working fine. And here is the GitHub link. So I guess you guys now have a pretty good idea about React, how React works, and all these things. And you guys can now create your own React application also, right? And I also showed you a little example how to deploy. But like, this is not the way how things get deployed in production level. We have lot more things to do. If I give an example in my organization, how we do it, we set up pipelines for it, which checks all the reactor, like all the code. First, it checks the code, it checks the linter. There are a lot of things before the real application get deployed. But for the very start, this is good. This is very good. Like you can create a React application and deploy it like this also to showcase your work and all. Okay. I hope so that you guys have enjoyed this session, right? Have you guys or not? Come on, guys, at least I can have a feedback. I hope so. You guys have enjoyed this session. You guys have learned React. You guys have learned how to make React application, how to use context API, and in final also how to deploy the application. Okay. So with this note, I would like to take your leave, and we are finished with our React Bootcamp session, right? For certifications on all, you can connect to Let's Upgrade. They will guide you through. And I also hope that you guys been giving your attendance on daily basis throughout the session. So, thank you guys. Thank you for joining this session. And in future, let's see, like we can meet again. Till then, see ya, goodbye, and have a great day.